Good day. Today we are going to be talking about security technology, intrusion detection and prevention systems, and other security tools. For the contents of our report, we are going to be talking about intrusion detection and prevention systems, honeypots, honeynets, and padded cell systems, scanning and analysis tools, and biometric access controls.
Just a short introduction for this report. The protection of an organization's information assets relies at least as much on people as on technical controls. But technical solutions, guided by policy and properly implemented, are an essential component of an information security program. This chapter will discuss about describing additional and more advanced technologies, intrusion detection and prevention systems, honeypots, honeynets, padded cell systems, scanning and analysis tools, and access controls that organizations can use to enhance the security of their information assets.
The first part of our report it is about intrusion detection and prevention system. In short, this is the IDPS. An intrusion occurs when an attacker attempts to gain entry into or disrupt the normal operations of an information system, almost always with the intent to do harm. Basically, intrusion's intention is to harm the information system of an organization. In short, intrusion is not good for your information system. Intrusion prevention consists of activities that deter an intrusion. Some important intrusion prevention activities are writing and implementing good enterprise information security policy, planning and executing effective information security programs, installing and testing technology-based information security countermeasures, and conducting and measuring the effectiveness of employee training and awareness activities. Intrusion detection consists of procedures and systems that identify system instructions. Intrusion detection systems, or IDSs, became commercially available in the late 1990s. An IDS works like a burglar alarm in that it detects a violation and activates an alarm. This alarm can be audible and or visual, or it can be silent. Let us now proceed to the IDPS terminologies. We have quite a few here. Quite a lot here. For the first one is alert or alarm. An indication that a system has just been attacked or is under attack. IDPS alerts and alarms take the form of audible signals, email messages, pager notifications, or pop-up windows. Next is evasion, the process by which attackers change the format and or timing of their activities to avoid being detected by the IDPS. The next is false attack stimulus, an event that triggers an alarm when no actual attack is in progress. Next is false negative. It is the failure of an IDPS to react to an actual attack event. The next one is false positive, an alert or alarm that occurs in the absence of an actual attack. Next is noise, alarm events that are accurate and noteworthy but that do not pose significant threats to information security. Site policy, the rules and configurations guidelines governing the implementation and operation of IDPSs within the organization. Site policy awareness, an IDPS's ability to dynamically modify its configuration in response to environmental activity. True attack stimulus, an event that triggers alarms and causes an IDPS to react as if a real attack is in progress. Next is tuning, the process of adjusting an IDPS to maximize its efficiency detecting true positives, while minimizing both false positives and negatives. Confidence value. The measure of an IDPS's ability to correctly detect and identify certain types of attacks. Alarm filtering. The process of classifying IDPS alerts so that they can be more effectively managed. Alarm clustering and compaction. A process of grouping almost identical alarms that happen at close to the same time into a single higher level alarm. So the question is, why do we need to use an IDPS? So here are factors on why we should use IDPS. Number one is to prevent problem behaviors by increasing the perceived risk of discovery and punishment for those who would attack or otherwise abuse the system. Second is to detect attacks and other security violations that are not prevented by other security measures. Third is to detect and deal with the preambles to attacks, commonly experienced as network probes and other doorknob rattling activities. Fourth is to document the existing threat to an organization. Fifth is to act as quality control for security design and administration, especially in large and complex enterprises. Number 6 is to provide useful information about intrusions that do take place, allowing improved diagnosis, recovery, and correction of causative factors. So let us now proceed to the types of IDPS. So there are basically two types of IDPS. The first type is network-based IDPS. So a network-based IDPS resides on a computer or appliance connected to a segment of an organization's network and monitors network traffic on that network segment, looking for indications of ongoing or successful attacks. When the NIDPS identifies activity that it is programmed to recognize as an attack, it responds by sending notifications to administrators. A NIDPS is installed at a specific place in the network, such as on the inside of an edge router, from where it is possible to monitor the traffic going into and out of a particular network segment rather. The next type of IDPS is the host-based IDPS. A host-based IDPS or HIDPS resides on a particular computer or server known as the host and monitors activity only on that system. HIDPSs are also known as system integrity verifiers because they benchmark and monitor the status of key system files and detect when an intruder creates, modifies, or deletes monitored files. An HIDPS has an advantage over an NIDPS in that it can access encrypted information traveling over the network and use it to make decisions about potential or actual attacks. Next is we have the IDPS detection methods. The first method is the signature-based IDPS. It's also sometimes called as a knowledge-based IDPS or a misuse detection IDPS. It examines network traffic in search of patterns that match known signatures, that is, pre-configured, predetermined attack patterns. Signature-based IDPS technology is widely used because many attacks have clear and distinct signatures. A potential problem with the signature-based approach is that new attack strategies must continually be added into the IDPS's database of signatures. Otherwise, attacks that use new strategies will not be recognized and might succeed. The other method is statistical anomaly-based IDPS, or also known as behavior-based IDPS. It collects statistical summaries by observing traffic that is known to be normal. This normal period of evaluation establishes a performance baseline. Once the baseline is established, the STAT IDPS periodically samples network activity and, using statistical methods, compares the sample network activity to this baseline. The advantage of the statistical anomaly-based approach is that the IDPS can detect new types of attacks since it looks for abnormal activity of any type. Another method is the Stateful Protocol Analysis IDPS. This stateful inspection firewalls track each network connection between internal and external systems using a state table to record which station sent which packet and when, essentially pairing communicating parties. Stateful Protocol Analysis, or SPA, is a process of comparing predetermined files of generally accepted definitions of benign activity for each protocol state against observed events to identify deviations. The next method is log file monitors, or LFM. LFM IDPS is similar to a NIDPS. Using LFM, the system reviews the log files generated by servers, network devices, and even other IDPSs, looking for patterns and signatures that may indicate that an attack or intrusion is in process or has already occurred. The next part of this report is IDPS response behavior. So each IDPS responds to external stimulation in a different way, depending on its configuration and function. Some respond in active ways, others respond in passive ways. The following list describes some of the responses of an IDPS can be configured to produce. So these are the following lists that describe some responses of an IDPS. So it could be audible or visual alarm, SNMP traps and plugins, email message, page or phone message, log entry, evidentiary packet dump, take action against the intruder, launch program, reconfigure firewall, terminate session, or terminate connection. Now we will proceed to selecting IDPS approaches and products. The following considerations and questions may help you prepare a specification for acquiring and deploying an intrusion detection product. Firstly, we have is the technical and policy considerations. In order to determine which IDPS best meets an organization's needs, first consider the organizational environment in technical, physical, and political terms. Next is, what is your system environment? The first requirement for a potential IDPS is that it function in your system's environment. This is important. If an IDPS is not designed to accommodate the information sources that are available on your systems, it will not be able to see anything, neither normal activity nor an attack on your system. So basically, if IDPS is not designed to accommodate in your information sources, it is useless. So make sure um, it is compatible on your system. Next is, what are your security goals and objectives? The next step is to articulate the goals and objectives you wish to attain by using an IDPS. So you need some goals and objectives here. Next is, what is your existing security policy? You should review your existing organization security policy, which will serve as the template against which your IDPS will be configured. You may find you need to augment the policy or else derive the following items from it. We now proceed to the strengths and limitations of IDPSs. Let us start with the strengths. So here I have the list of the strengths of IDPSs. I will be reading it to you. Firstly is monitoring and analysis of system events and user behaviors. The next is testing the security states of system configurations. Next, baselining the security state of a system, then tracking any changes to that baseline. Recognizing patterns of system events that correspond to known attacks. Recognizing patterns of activity that statistically vary from normal activity. Managing operating system audit and logging mechanisms and the data they generate. Alerting appropriate staff by appropriate means when attacks are detected. Measuring enforcement of security policies encoded in the analysis engine. Providing default information security policies. And allowing non-security experts to perform important security monitoring functions. So that is for the strengths. And here are the limitations of an IDPS. Compensating for weak or missing security mechanisms in the protection infrastructure such as firewalls, identification and authentication systems, link encryption systems, access control mechanisms, and virus detection and eradication software. Instantaneously detecting, reporting, and responding to an attack when there is a heavy network or processing load. Detecting newly published attacks or variants of existing attacks, effectively responding to attacks launched by sophisticated attackers. Automatically investigating attacks without human intervention, resisting all attacks that are intended to defeat or circumvent them. Compensating for problems with the fidelity of information sources. And lastly, dealing effectively with switched networks. We now proceed to the deployment and implementation of an IDPS. Deploying and implementing an IDPS is not always a straightforward task, so it's not that very easy. The strategy for deploying an IDPS should take into account a number of factors. These are the following. These are the following factors in deployment and implementation of an IDPS. Firstly is the centralized control strategy. In a centralized IDPS control strategy, all IDPS control functions are implemented and managed in a central location, represented in the figure with the large square symbol labeled IDPS console. The IDPS console includes the management software, which collects information from the remote sensors, analyzes the systems or networks, and determines whether the current situation has deviated from the pre-configured baseline. Next is the fully distributed control strategy, or the FDCS. It is the opposite of the centralized strategy. All control functions are applied at the physical location of each IDPS component, each monitoring site using its own paired sensors to perform its own controlling functions to achieve the necessary detection, reaction, and response functions. Thus, each sensor or agent is best configured to deal with its own environment. Since the IDPSs do not have to wait for a response from a centralized control facility, their response time to individual attacks is greatly enhanced. Next is the partially distributed control strategy. This strategy combines the best of the other two strategies. While individual agents can still analyze and respond to local threats, their reporting to a hierarchical central facility enables the organization to detect widespread attacks. This blended approach to reporting is one of the more effective methods of detecting intelligent attackers, especially those who probe an organization at multiple points of entry. trying to identify the system's configurations and weaknesses. Before they launch a concerted attack, the partially distributed control strategy also allows the organization to optimize for economy of scale in the implementation of key management software and personnel, especially in the reporting areas. Next is the IDPS deployment. So for the deployment is deploying network-based IDPSs. The placement of the sensor agent is critical to the operation of all IDPSs and especially critical in the case of NIDPSs. NIST recommends the following 4 locations for NIDPS sensors. First location is behind each external firewall in the network DMZ. The second location is outside an external firewall. Location 3 is on major network backbones, and the fourth location is on critical subnets. Deploying HAT-based IDPS. The proper implementation of HIDPSs can be a painstaking and time-consuming task, as each HIDPS must be custom configured to its host system. Deployment begins with implementing the most critical systems first. This poses a dilemma for the deployment team, since the first system to be implemented are mission critical, and any problems in the installation could be catastrophic to the organization. Thus, it may be beneficial to practice an implementation on one or more test servers configured on a network segment that resembles the mission critical system. Gaining an edge on the learning curve by training on non-production system benefits the overall deployment process by reducing the risk of unforeseen complications. So we proceed now to the measuring the effectiveness of IDPSs. IDPSs are evaluated using two dominant metrics. First, administrators evaluate the number of attacks detected in a known collection of probes. Second, the administrators examine the level of use, commonly measured in megabits per second or Mbps, of network traffic, at which the IDPSs fail. Not all IDPSs use simple signature-based detection. Some systems, as discussed earlier, use the almost infinite combination of network performance characteristics of statistical anomaly-based detection to detect a potential attack. Some of these testing processes will enable the administrator to do the following. Number one is record and retransmit packets from a real virus or worm scan. Second is to record and retransmit packets from a real virus or worm scan with incomplete TCP/IP session connections or missing SYN packets. And thirdly is conduct a real virus or worm attack against a hardened or sacrificial system. In order to perform a true assessment of the effectiveness of IDPS systems, the test process should be as realistic as possible in its simulation of an actual event. This means coupling realistic traffic loads with realistic levels of attacks. You cannot expect an IDPS to respond a few packet probes as if they represent a denial of service attack.
Honeypots, honeynets, and padded cell systems. In the world of computer security, there are a lot different terms and technologies that can be used to protect systems and data. Honeypots and honeynets. Honeypots are deception systems used to divert potential attackers' attention away from important systems. A honeynet is formed when many honeypot systems are linked together on a network segment. A honeypot system, also known as honeynet subnetwork, has pseudo services that mimic well-known services, but it is designed in such a way that it appears vulnerable to assaults. This combination is intended to entice attacker into disclosing themselves. The idea being that once these attackers are identified, companies can better secure their networks against future attackers that target actual assets. What can a honeypot do? Honeypots are intended to perform the following: shift an attacker's concentration away from key systems, obtain data about bad actors' behavior and urge the attacker to be on the desired system for an adequate time. This way, you could record and maybe respond to the incident. Since the information in honeypot looks to be valuable, any unwanted access to raises up suspicions. Honeypots are supplied with sophisticated detectors and incidentally recorders. This feature helps identify attempted system access and collect data on the behavior of potential attackers. Production versus research honeypots. There are two primary types of honeypot design. Production honeypots serve as a decoy system inside fully operational network and servers, often as part of an intrusion detection system or IDS. They deflect criminal attention from the real system while analyzing malicious activity to help mitigate vulnerabilities. Research honeypots, used for educational purposes and security enhancement. They contain trackable data that you can trace when stolen to analyze the attack. Types of honeypot deployment. There are three types of honeypot deployments that permit threat actors to perform different levels of malicious activity. Pure honeypots, complete production system that monitor attacks through bug taps on the link that connects the honeypot to the network. They are unsophisticated. Low interaction honeypot imitate service and systems that frequently attack criminal attention. They offer a method for collecting data from blind attacks such as botnets and worms malware. High interaction honeypots, complex setups that behave like real production infrastructure. They don't restrict the level of activity of cybercriminal, providing extensive cybersecurity insight. However, they are higher maintenance and require expertise and the use of additional technologies like virtual machines to ensure attackers cannot access the real system. HoneyNet, a network of honeypots. A honeynet is a decoy network that contains one or more honeypots. It looks like a real network and contains multiple systems, but is hosted on one or only few servers, each representing one environment. For example, a Windows honeypot machine, a Mac honeypot machine, and a Linux honeypot machine. A honeypot monitors the traffic going in and out of the network and directs it to the honeypot instances. You can inject vulnerabilities into a honeynet to make it easy for an attackers to access the trap. Example of a honeynet topology. Any system on the honeynet may serve as a point of entry for attackers. The honeynet gathers intelligence on the attackers and diverts them from the real network. The advantage of a honeynet over simple honeypot is that it feels more like a real network and has large catchment area. This makes honeynet a better solution for large, complex network. It presents attackers with alternative corporate network which can present an attractive alternative to the real one. Spam trap, an email honeypot. Spam traps are fraud management tools that help internet services providers or ISP identify and block spammers. They help make your inbox safer by blocking vulnerabilities. Type of spam traps include username typos. The spam filter detects typos resulting from human or machine error, including and sends the email into the spam folder. This includes misspelled email address like, for example, johnlabra.com instead of the real johnlabra.com. Expired email accounts. Some providers use abandoned email accounts or expired domain names as spam traps. Purchase email list. These often contain many invalid email addresses that can trigger a spam trap. Additionally, since the sender didn't gain an authorization to send emails to the accounts on the list, they can be treated as spammers and blacklisted. What is a padded cell? A padded cell is a tightened honeypot that works in a unison with the traditional intrusion detection and prevention system, which is abbreviated as IDPS. Honeypot lures the attackers with enticing material. The IDPS makes discovery, moves them to a unique mock environment, padding cell, where they are neutralized. Padded cells, like honeypots, are well equipped and provide a unique opportunity for a target company to watch an attacker's operation. However, there are some points you should also take into consideration if you want to integrate these systems to your defense. You should clearly understand the legal consequences of utilizing such tools. Honeypots and padded cells have yet to proven the general purpose security systems. Once you redirect a skilled attacker into this baiting system, he or she may launch a more aggressive attack on your systems. You need a specialist to operate these systems. In such cases, the dangers are almost certainly well known and suitable security safeguards. Protocols and procedures are almost certainly already in place and properly practiced. Honeypot, honeynet, and padded cells technique may be useful for business seeking to identify and pursue attackers more aggressively. By developing these tools, business can gain a better understanding of who is targeting their systems and why, and take steps to mitigate the risk posed by the attackers. Trap and trace systems. Trap and trace systems use techniques to detect an intrusion and trace it back to its source. Trap comprises of honeypot or padded cells alarm. The drawbacks to trap and trace. Enticement. Procedure of attacking attention to system by placing the tantalizing bits of information in key locations. Entrapment. Luring an individual into committing a crime to get conviction. Enticement is legal and ethical, whereas entrapment is not. Scanning and analysis tool. It is used to collect information that attacker would require to launch successful attack. Attack protocol is a series of steps or process used by an attacker in a logical sequence to launch attack against the target system or network. Footprinting. Organized research of internet addresses controlled by a target organization. Fingerprinting is a systematic survey of all target organizations' internet addresses collected during footprinting phase. Fingerprinting reveals helpful information about the internal structure and operational nature of target systems or network for the anticipated attack. These tools are valuable to network defender as they can quickly pinpoint parts of systems or network that require a prompt repair to close the vulnerability. Port scanner. Port scanners are tools which are used by both attackers and defenders to identify the computer's active on network and useful information. They can scan for specific types of computer, protocols, or sources, or their scans can be generic. The more specific scanner is, the better it can provide attackers and defenders useful information. Active intrusion prevention. Intrusion prevention is a system that allows for the active blocking of attacks while they are in line on the network, before they even get to the target host. Intrusion prevention is the process of performing intrusion detection and attempting to stop detected possible incidents. Intrusion Prevention System, or IPS, focus primarily on identifying possible incidents, logging information about them, attempting to stop them, and reporting them to security administrators. Here are the most common prevention technologies. Firewalls. The purpose of a firewall is to enforce an organization's security policy at the border of two networks. Packet filtering. The most basic type of firewalls perform what is called stateful packeting to filtering, which means that they can remember which side initiated the connection and rules called Access Control List or ACL. Proxies. The main difference between proxies and stateful packet filtering firewall is that proxies have the ability to terminate and reestablish connection between two end hosts. Application layer firewalls. The app firewall have become increasingly popular. They are designed to protect certain types of application, web or database, and can configured to perform a level blocking that is much more intuitive and granular, based not only on network information but also application-specific variables so that administrators can be much more precise in what they are blocking. Intrusion Prevention Systems. An intrusion prevention system, or IPS, is software that has all the capabilities of intrusion detection system and can also attempt to stop possible incidents using a set of conditions on signatures or anomalies.
Scanning and analyzing tools. Scanning tools are typically used as part of an attack protocol to collect information that an attacker would need to launch a successful attack. Scanner and analysis tools can find vulnerabilities in systems, holes in security components, and unsecured aspects of the network. So, the attack protocol is a series of steps or processes used by an attacker in a logical sequence to launch an attack against a target system or a network. One of the preparatory parts of the attack protocol is the collection of publicly available information about a potential target, or a process known as footprinting. So what is footprinting? Footprinting is the organized research of the internet address owned or controlled by a target or organization. Now, there are types of scanning tools. There is a port scanners, firewall analysis tools, operating system detection tools, vulnerability scanners, packet sniffers, and wireless security tools. First is the port scanners. So, port scanning utilities or port scanners are tools used by both attackers and defenders to identify or to fingerprint the computers that are active on a network, as well as the ports and services active on those computers, the functions and the roles the machines are fulfilling, and other useful information. The more specific the scanner is, the more useful the information it provides to attackers and defenders. So, the most popular port scanner that is widely used is the Nmap, which is run in both Unix and Windows systems. Now, these are the select commonly used port numbers. So, a port is a network channel or connection point in a data communication system. When the TCP networking protocol, TCP, and user datagram protocol or UDP port numbers differentiate the multiple communication channels that are used to connect to the network services being offered on the same network device. So, each application within TCP/IP has a unique port number. Some have default ports but can also use other ports. Some of the well-known port numbers are presented in this table. Um, all in all, there are 65,536 port numbers in use for TCP and another 65,536 port numbers for UDP. Next is the firewall analysis tool. So there are several tools that automate the remote discovery of firewall rules and assist the administrator or the attacker in analyzing the rules to determine exactly what they allow and what they reject. Now, like the last example, the Nmap, it has some advanced options that are useful for firewall analysis. The Nmap option called idle scanning, which is run with the iSwitch, will allow the Nmap user to bounce your scan across a firewall by using one of the idle DMZ hosts as the initiator of the scan. If there is more than one host in the DMZ and one host uses non-random IP IDs, then the attacker can query the server and obtain the current used IP ID as well as the known algorithm for incrementing the IP IDs. Or more specifically, since most operating systems do not use truly random IP packet identification numbers, if there is more than one host in the DMZ and one host uses non-random IP IDs, then the attacker can query the service and obtain the current used IP ID as well as the known algorithm for incrementing the IP address. So if the attacker can then spoof a packet that is allegedly from server X and destined for an internal IP address behind the firewall, if the port is open on the internal machine, the internal machine replies to server X with a SYNACK packet, which forces server X to respond with a TCP reset packet. So a firewall tool example is a Firework, which was authored by Mike Schiffman. So Firewalk uses incrementing time to live or TTL packets to determine the path into a network as well as the default firewall policy. So running Firewalk against a target machine reveals where routers and firewalls are filtering traffic to the target hosts. So HPing, which is Modified Ping Client, it supports multiple protocols and has a command line method of specifying nearly any of the ping parameters. You can use HPing with modified TTL values to determine the infrastructure of a DMZ. You can also use HPing with the specific ICMP flags in order to bypass poorly configured firewalls. Example firewalls that allow all ICMP traffic to pass through and find internal systems. And it is a tool that can help close up an open or poorly configured firewall, will help the network defender minimize the risk of an attack. So operating system detection tools. Detecting a target computer's operating system is very valuable to an attacker because once the OS is known, all of the vulnerabilities to which it is susceptible can easily be determined. So, there are many tools that use networking protocols to determine a remote computer's OS. One specific tool worth mentioning is Xprobe, which uses ICMP to determine the remote OS. This tool can be found in this ano, in this link. So when Xprobe is run, it sends many different ICMP queries to the target host. As reply packets are received, Xprobe matches these responses from the target's TCP/IP stack with its own internal database of known responses. Because most OS have a unique way of responding to ICMP requests, Xprobe is very reliable in finding matches and thus detecting the operating systems of remote computers. So, as reply packets are received, Xprobe, that's what I've already said from before. It is very reliable in finding matches and thus detecting the operating system of remote computers. Next is the vulnerability scanners. Active vulnerability scanners scan networks for highly detailed information. An active scanner is one that initiates traffic on the network in order to determine security holes. This type of scanner identifies exposed usernames and groups, shows open network shares, and exposes configuration problems, and other vulnerabilities in servers. Example is the GFI LANguard Network Security Scanner, which is available as freeware for non-commercial use. Next is Nessus, which is a professional freeware utility that uses IP packets to identify the hosts available on the network, the services or ports they are offering, the operating system and OS version they are running, and the type of packet filters and firewalls in use, and dozens of other characteristics of the network. So there are class of vulnerability scanners, and one of them is the black box scanners or the fuzzers. So fuzz testing is a straightforward testing technique that looks for vulnerabilities in a program or protocol by feeding random input to the program or a network running the protocol. So vulnerabilities can be detected by measuring the outcome of the random inputs. So one example of a fuzz scanner is Spike. So Spike has two primary components. Number one is as the website visitors utilizes the proxy, Spike builds a database of each of the traversed pages, forms, and other web-specific information. And when the website owner determines that enough history has been collected to fully characterize the websites, Spike can be used to check the website for bugs. That is, administrators can use the usage history collected by Spike to traverse all known pages, forms, and active programs, and so forth. Then, it can also test the system by attempting overflows, SQL injections, cross-site scripting, and many other classes of web attacks. Anyways, Spike Proxy is a full-blown proxy server. Um, it also has a core functionality to fuzz any protocol that utilizes TCP/IP. By sniffing a session and building a Spike script or building a full-blown C program using the Spike API, a user can simulate and fuzz nearly any protocol. So fuzzers or black box scanners and Nessus in destructive mode can be very dangerous tools and should only be used in lab environment. Because similarly in function, the Nessus scanner has a class of attacks called destructive. So if enabled, Nessus attempts common overflow techniques against a target host. And in fact, these tools are so powerful that even system defenders who use them are not likely to use them in the most aggressive modes on their product networks. These are the popular scanners used. Um, One is the Nessus, like the example from earlier, and Retina, and then and the Internet scanner. So the Nessus scanner is available at no cost. And other two require a license fee, like you need to pay. So there are three tools that can perform this action. One is the Core Impact, then the Immunities Canvas, and the Metasploit framework. A passive vulnerability scanner is one that listens in on the network and determines vulnerable versions of both server and client software. There exists a class of scanners that actually exploit the remote machine and allow the vulnerability analyst, or sometimes called a penetration tester, to create an account, modify a web page, or view data. And also these three tools, the Core Impact, Immunity Canvas, and Metasploit framework, can be very dangerous and should only be used when absolutely necessary. So there are two primary vendors offering this type of scanning solution. First is the Tenable Network Security with its Passive Vulnerability Scanner, or PVS, and second is the SourceFire with its RNA product. So passive vulnerability scanners have the ability to find client-side vulnerabilities that are typically not found by active scanners. Anyways, these tools simply monitor the network connections to and from a server to obtain a list of vulnerable applications. For instance, an active scanner operating without domain admin rights would be unable to determine the version of Internet Explorer running on a desktop machine, whereas a passive scanner can make that determination by observing the traffic to and from the client. Next is the packet sniffer, or the network protocol analyzer. It is a network tool that collects copies of packets from the network and analyzes them. It can provide a network administrator with valuable information for diagnosing and resolving network issues. And if it's in the wrong hands, however, a sniffer can be used to eavesdrop on network traffic. So there are two, which is the commercial and the open source sniffers. If you guys have already seen this logo, we have used it in the past subject, which is the Wireshark, or it was formerly known as Ethereal. So, Wireshark allows the administrator to examine data from both live network traffic and captured traffic. Wireshark has several features including a language filter and TCP session reconstitution utility. And the last in our topic is the wireless security tools. So, a wireless connection, while convenient, has many potential security holes because uh, so a wireless security toolkit should include the ability to sniff wireless traffic, scan wireless hosts, and assess the level of privacy or confidentiality afforded on the wireless networks. Now, in 2006, the Insecure.org conducted a survey to identify the top 5 wireless tools, and the winners were Kismet, which is a powerful wireless uh, sniffer, Network Detector, and IDPS, which works by passively sniffing the networks. Second is the NetStumbler, a freeware Windows distumbler. Third is AirCrack, a WEP and WPA cracking tool. Fourth is the AirSnort, an 802.11 WEP encryption cracking tool, and the Kismac, a GUI passive wireless stumbler for Mac iOS 10. And the next worth mentioning is the AirSnare. AirSnare is a free tool that can be run on a low-end wireless workstation. AirSnare monitors our airwaves for any new devices or access points. When it finds one, AirSnare now sounds an alarm alerting the administrators that a new, potentially dangerous wireless apparatus is attempting access on a closed wireless connection. So, the tools discussed so far helps the attacker and the defender prepare themselves to complete the next steps in the attack protocol, which are the attack, compromise, and exploit.
Biometric access controls. Biometric access control is based on the use of some measurable human characteristic or trait to authenticate the identity of a proposed system user. It relies upon recognition, the same thing you rely upon to identify friends, family, and other people you know. The use of biometric-based authentication is expected to have a significant impact in the future as technical and ethical issues with the technology are resolved. Biometric authentication technologies include the following: fingerprint comparison of the supplicant's actual fingerprint to a stored fingerprint, palm print comparison of the supplicant's actual palm print to a stored palm print, hand geometric comparison of the supplicant's actual hand to a stored measurement, facial recognition using a photographic ID card in which a human security guard compares the supplicant's face to a photo, facial recognition using a digital camera in which a supplicant's face is compared to a stored image, retinal print comparison of the supplicant's actual retina to a stored image, iris pattern comparison of the supplicant's actual iris to a stored image. Among all possible biometrics,
Only three human characteristics are usually considered truly unique. They are as follows: fingerprints, retina of the eye or blood vessel pattern, iris of the eye or random pattern of features found in the iris including freckles, pits, striations, vasculature, coronas, and crypts. Most of the technologies that scan human characteristics convert the image to some of minutia. Minutia are unique points of reference that are digitized and stored in an encrypted format when the user system access credential credentials are created. The picture shows biometric recognition characteristics. Access attempt results in a measurement that is compared with the encoded value to determine if the user is who he or she claims to be. A problem with this method is that some human characteristics can change over time due to normal development, injury, or illness, which means that system designer must create fallback or fail-safe authentication mechanisms. Signature and voice recognition technologies are also considered to be biometric access controls measures. Signature recognition has become commonplace. Retail stores use signature recognition or at least signature capture for authentication during a purchase. Voice recognition works in a similar fashion in that an initial voice print of the user reciting a phrase is captured and stored. Later, when the user attempts to access the system, the authentication process requires the user to speak this same phrase so that the technology can compare the current voice print against the stored value. Effectiveness of biometrics. Biometric technologies are evaluated on three basic criteria. First, the false reject rate, which is the percentage of supplicants who are in fact authorized users but are denied access. Second, the false accept rate, which is the percentage of supplicants who are unauthorized users but are granted access. And third, the crossover error rate, which is the level at which the number of false rejections equal the false acceptances. False reject rate. The false reject rate is the percentage of identification instances in which authorized users are denied access as a result of a failure in the biometric device. These failures is known as type 1 error, while, na, while a nuisance to supplicants who are authorized users. This error rate is probably at least concerned to security professionals since rejection of unauthorized users represents no threat to security. False accept rate. The false accept rate is percentage of identification instances in which unauthorized users are allowed access to systems or areas as a result of a failure in the biometric device. This failure is known as type 2 error and is unacceptable to security professionals. Crossover error rate, or also known as CER, is the level at which the number of false rejections equals the false acceptances and is also known as the equal error rate. This is possibly most common and important overall measures of the accuracy of biometric system. Most biometric system can be adjusted to compensate for both false positive and false negative errors. Adjustment to one extreme creates a system that requires perfect matches and result in high false rejects, but almost no false accepts. Acceptability of biometrics. As you learn, as you've learned, a balance must be struck between how acceptable a security system is to its users and how effective it is in maintaining security. Many biometric systems that are highly reliable and effective are considered somewhat intrusive to users. As a result, many security professionals, in an effort to avoid confrontation and possible user boycott of the biometric controls, don't implement them. The table shows how certain biometric ranks in terms of effectiveness and acceptance. In terms, the order of effectiveness is nearly exactly opposite the order of acceptance.